Welcome to the 100th episode of the number one friendship podcast in the country. I'm Aaron Karo.
I'm Matt Ritter.
And I'm Vivek Murthy, Surgeon General of the United States.
What? Whoa! We got him. We
Special
did.
guest alert.
We nailed it.
I'm here and I'm excited to talk to you guys.
This is so exciting. Thank you so much. We've been talking about you nonstop for 99 episodes.
So we have. Your name has popped up on many an episode. So it felt a little stalkerish, but you know what? We pulled it off.
Well, I'm not sure what you've been talking about, but I hope it hasn't been bad stuff. But I'm really excited to talk as well, because I just got to say, shout out to you guys for your podcast. What an amazing job you've done, like creating this podcast and making it such a fun, but also incredibly valuable resource for the whole community. So appreciate what you've done here.
Thank you so much. And when we were telling our buddies that we were interviewing the Surgeon General, everyone was like, "Whoa, my God, it's so cool!" And then everyone was kind of like, "Wait, what?" Like, you have released this major advisory about the epidemic of loneliness. You've been very upfront on the issue, but like, isn't the Surgeon General typically like obesity, like smoking, like loneliness and friendship is kind of our lane? So like, how does the Surgeon General fit in here?
Well, I know it feels like I'm encroaching on your lane, so apologies for that. But but you're right that traditionally the Office of Surgeon General has focused on issues like tobacco, and actually we do that too, and we continue our work on that space. One of the things I realized when I came into office was that we are just not paying nearly enough attention to the other half of our health. You know, physical health matters tremendously, but our mental health matters too. And issues like loneliness, they take an immense toll on both our physical and mental health. So when I came into office, I realized that in addition to doing some of the traditional work, that we also needed to talk more about mental health. We needed to pull the curtain back on some issues that people have been struggling with for a long time, often in silence and under the shroud of stigma, but which are really important. And loneliness happens to be one of those issues.
You know, it's funny you say that, because we actually have kind of coined a phrase, social fitness, because you have the physical fitness and people know about it and they go to a trainer, but they also have sort of been on the notion that they need to fix their sort of emotional health with therapy. But this sort of social health lives in to us a little bit of a tangential, other sphere that people have not really focused on at all. So I love that. And I also want to give you a shout out, because I'm a new parent, and I noticed you've also pointed the finger and shed a light on parental stress, which is just another one that I think people aren't talking about. So I love just generally that you are completely shifting the way that not only the Surgeon General looks at things, but just trying to shift the way that Americans kind of look at their health and give it a more holistic view.
Well, I appreciate you saying that Matt. I really do think we have to expand the lens through which we look at health and realize what I think a lot of people intuitively know, which is that how we feel, as well as, what we eat and how we sleep and our friendships, like all of these really impact our overall well-being. And if we're only dealing with some of them and not with others, that means that we're not doing everything we can to ensure that people are healthy, happy, and fulfilled. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's what we want for ourselves. That's what we want for our kids. As a father myself, I think about my kids' future, and I have no idea what they're going to do in life. I don't know what kind of jobs they'll have, what kind of careers they'll be interested in. But I don't know where they'll live. I don't know, if they'll choose to get married or who they'll marry. But what I do know is that whatever that ends up being, those decisions, I want them to be healthy, happy, and fulfilled. And if that's what we all want for ourselves and for our kids, then we've got to recognize all the different ingredients that go into that. And our physical health is part of that. Our mental health is another, but our social health is a component as well. And I think when we start seeing that just in the way you described it as a dimension of health, then I think we can pay more attention to it, build our lives around it, and ask really important questions like, are we investing enough in building healthy relationships in our life?
So I want to talk about men for a second. So this is a great example. Karo always makes fun of me for this, and this is kind of like the impetus for our pod. A couple of years ago, right when we were starting this pod, I hung out with my good buddy, and when I got home, my wife asked me how it went. She said, "Oh, how's his job? How's his wife? How are his kids?" And I honestly was like, don't know, didn't ask. Right? Like, why are we like this? Is it genetic for men? And we have our own theories, but I want to know what your kind of finding about men specifically? Like, what have you learned? And, what do we need to do just specific to men? Because our podcast, we have male and female listeners for sure, but, we're both a couple of guys dealing with a little bit stuff that's more focused on men.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really important question, and I think as a guy myself, I've had to really think about why it is that it's like been harder for me sometimes to make friends and to build community than for my wife, for example, who just frankly seems better at it. And I think that there are a few things going on with guys. I think that number one, I think from a cultural perspective, like there isn't as much weight or importance that's placed on men investing in their friendships, right? Like when you think about how you're judged as being successful as a man in traditional society, right? It's usually, how much money did you make? How much status did you acquire in society? How much power did you accrue? Are you famous? Are you well known? Do people respect you? I mean, these are the ways in which we think about making it as a traditional guy. But what about the quality of your friendships? That doesn't seem to really factor in, right? So there's this notion just in terms of social construct that friendships are just less important, lower on the priority list for where men should focus. And then there's also another challenge around this stigma around being vulnerable. Now, being vulnerable that word can mean a lot of things to different people. But I think about vulnerability as being real, right? Real about what's going on in your life. What are you feeling? What are you going through? And then being open to hearing the same from somebody else. And that's really vital and that's important. But it's more socially acceptable for guys to get together and watch a ball game and just talk about the ball game than it is for them to actually talk about how they're doing and what's going on in their life, especially hard things. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with getting together to watch the ball game. I love doing that, like, with my guy friends. And there is some bonding that happens when you're experiencing something together. So I don't want to at all, in any way diminish the value that has. But I think as guys, what we tend not to do enough, and what I think society sometimes discourages us from doing, is sharing openly about what we're going through, especially when there's any doubt, uncertainty, sadness, or God forbid, weakness, like involved, in how we're doing. And we tend not to ask that of other people sometimes because sometimes we're not sure. What are we going to do if they actually share how they're really doing? Are we going to know how to respond? So part of this to me illustrates the fact that social construct and stigma, as well as like what we expose, boys to over time really matters. Like if young boys see people having conversations about all dimensions of their life, from everything from the ball game to like what did it feel like at work when you ran into that hard situation, to hey, you just broke up with somebody and how are you doing, like how are you managing, do you need help? Like if you see the range of conversations that may occur between men, if you see that as a young boy, that sends you a message that hey, that's normal. It's what it's like to build a relationship with another guy in your life. And so I think that's what we need more of, but a lot of men just don't get that, and so they don't end up, I think, sometimes being able to prioritize or build the kind of deep friendships that, frankly, both men and women need in their life.
Yeah, we actually have one of our sayings is thank you. Is it a gateway emotion to I love you? Like most men are not just going to suddenly go from hey, I'm the guy who watches the ball game to opening up and sharing with their friends. So that's why we've been trying to, like, small things like saying thank you to your friend. It just opens you up to a way of speaking and a way of being that a lot of guys were just not able to or didn't grow up that way.
Mm-hmm.
Matt wouldn't say I love you to me, and then through the course of the podcast he's opened up, and now I can't get him to stop. I mean, every day it's love.
I love you, buddy. I do. What can I say?
I love you too, but we get it. I mean, the Surgeon General's on here embarrassing me. I will also
I just say how awesome that is, though, that you guys can say that to each other, because look, there are all kinds of love we have in our life. There's romantic love, there's friendship love, but being able to just experience and express the love that you have for a dear friend, I mean, that is just so vital, especially in a world where so many people are walking around just feeling invisible, like they don't belong and like they don't matter. Like if they just disappeared off the face of the earth tomorrow, nobody would even care. But when you hear somebody say, hey, I love you, man, I'm so glad you're in my life, that's real. It says something that, hey, actually my presence does matter and my absence is missed. And we all need to hear and feel that at some level in our lives.
And I think that, and I'm sure both of you would agree, like a guy telling another guy he loves him, that's pretty manly. Like there's nothing weak about that. I think that's pretty tough.
I do think, I think it takes courage to be real. And I
Yeah.
think when you're able to express how you feel, the good and the bad of it, that's being real. And you got to be bold and courageous to do that. It's a lot easier to be scared about expressing yourself or hearing about someone else's expressions. It also, by the way, it takes courage to stand with somebody else's problems, right? A lot of times we may not ask about how somebody is doing because we're worried they're going to share a whole bunch of hardship that we don't know how to handle, right? And we may not be able to fix it. And this is one thing I will say as a guy that I am certainly guilty of, is this sort of instinct to constantly fix everything that's in front of you, which my wife has helpfully called me out on a number of occasions. I remember one particular instance where she was talking about a challenge that she was having with a friendship, and she was telling me about it, and I kept popping up with ideas. Well, what if you did this? What if you did that? And finally, at some point, she just said to me, she's like, sometimes I just need you to listen. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. And I was like, okay, that's really important. But being able to just listen to someone without leaping to try to fix their problem, and being able to sit with the uncertainty that you may not have a solution, that also takes courage. That takes some guts to be able to do. But that actually is what helps people feel that, hey, there's somebody with me here. I'm not alone. Like when somebody, if you've ever, anyone who's listening, if you've ever been really sick, or had to be in the hospital, for example, and you had a friend who showed up, you didn't expect that friend to like go do surgery on you or figure out what medications to prescribe or do your PT and rehab for you. But it felt good just having them there, right? Standing with you and by you, even though they couldn't solve all your problems. And I think it takes courage to be able to do that, to show up for others and to be able to share openly how we feel about others. And we should look at it that way because it is a source of strength, not weakness.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely the main message of our pod is we want you to stop looking at things the way that you've been looking at them, because that's been working. But you also hit on the classic line from White Men Can't Jump when Rosie Perez, Woody Harrelson gets her a glass of water and she goes, I don't want a glass of water. I wanted you to sympathize with my dry mouthedness.
Oh man, that's a great line. Yeah.
Matt always coming in with the references. I was also going to mention that Dr. Murthy, that you also touched on what Matt and I use when people ask what does friendship mean or how do you define friendship, and we always say two words: showing up.
Showing up.
Yeah. That's really all it is. So we're glad that you said that, and that's like 80% of the battle.
I love that. I couldn't agree more.
I also forgot to make fun of Matt because he mentioned his kid 3 minutes and 17 seconds in. That's
we usually do a shot. We do a shot every time I say I have a kid, and Aaron doesn't understand, but he will one day.
One day.
Well, Matt, tell me how old is your child?
I've got a 17-month-old and another one on the way.
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, so filling up the house. Yeah, we love it. Actually, Aaron did the nicest thing. I'm just going to brag about my friend for a second. He snuck in, I don't know if you know this, we have this giant trophy dedicated to friendship. That's what launched the pod.
Yeah.
He snuck a mini trophy in that said Baby of the Year into my wife's to-go bag at the hospital. And we only found it after she gave birth. And we started crying, and it came with a little t-shirt that said Baby of the Year. And so we started taking pictures, and all the nurses are like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I explained it, like, that's all well and good, but you can't really have like a dangerous metal object near a newborn baby. But it was it was such a testament to his friendship that, he did that. I mean, we just kind of have that kind of friendship. But I love what you said too about invisibility. We're learning as we go. And one of the things that I learned has become so integral to my life as a new parent is local community. Like we have like a farmer's market, like coffee clutch that gets together every Sunday morning. And it is that thing of like, I go to the same coffee shop and I just, even if it's just like a familiar face that recognizes me, that feeling that you're talking about, I think is so human and was lost a little bit during COVID. And, just for whatever reason, remote work, there's a lot of reasons that people are just feeling more and more isolated. But I do think all of us on some human level need to feel heard and feel seen.
Absolutely. No, it is a human need, and when you neglect it for a long period of time, it manifests in all kinds of different ways, but it really does impact our mental health and well-being. And I think that I love the fact that you have this sense of belonging, where you live, and that there are people who physically you're running into and seeing who bring familiarity at your life. And I do think that you're making a point that I think is really important to underscore, which is the power and importance of in-person interaction. Like I feel like it in the world we live in, people move around a lot. They change jobs, like they go to school in different places, and our friendship circles scatter, right? And sometimes we are on hundreds or thousands of miles away, and we see each other every now and then, try to talk to each other when we can. But I think that there's something major that's lost when we don't have face-to-face time. And I think that when you have, for example, people you care about who are in close distance of you, such that you could just take a walk and drop by, or so that you can show up for each other in a crisis easily, that really makes a difference. And even if it's not showing up in a crisis, even just running into one another, that's what helps create a sense of true community and belonging. And I just worry that sometimes we perhaps overestimate how much of that we can make up with more digital forms of communication, because it's just not the same at the end of the day.
We did a whole episode on what we call low-key hangs. You don't
Ah,
need to have huge plans. Like I love running errands. Karo hates running errands with friends,
I
but
don't want to go to Target
I
with
love
Matt.
it. I
Worst.
love it. I love it.
Would you go to Target with one of your buddy has to run errands?
yeah, I mean, if that meant we could catch up, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can't believe the Surgeon General is agreeing with Matt. This is board this over me for the rest of natural life. You guys, why don't you guys go to Target together?
I would love it. I would
Let's do
absolutely.
it, Matt. We'll go to
Yeah,
Target together.
Target runs, baby.
There is one place which would be hard for me to go, though. I have like some childhood trauma around this, and that's a fabric store. For some reason, I
Really?
spent so much time with my mom and my sister when I was a little kid, like in fabric stores. My mom would be buying fabric to make these clothes and that clothes, and I just associated with such intense pain and boredom that even like when I drive by a fabric store, I still get the heebie-jeebies. So
Oh, that's funny. That's
Yeah,
my dad
Johnny-
was my dad was a software guy, so any computer like office, I was like 9 hours. It felt like 9 hours. It was probably like 20 minutes, but it felt like 9 hours of just doing nothing.
hey, can I ask you guys a question though? I'm curious. Like, we probably all grew up in I'm guessing, a somewhat similar macro culture where it wasn't cool or okay to be a guy who talked about how you feel, and it certainly wasn't okay necessarily to say "I love you" to your friend. Um, how did you guys get to where you are now, where you are so able to be open, with how you're doing, and you're able to be so expressive in your friendships with other guys?
For me, I have parents who have modeled that behavior. My parents have a ton of friends. They travel with friends. They have every Friday night they have dinner with their friends. So I just sort of saw that as very natural.
Hmm.
And for me, honestly, I think it was probably when I lost my dad. Just a lot of introspection, a lot of, how do I want my life to be? What am I holding back on? And just seeing a lot of my friends show up for me when I needed it. And now being a parent, wanting to model that and wanting to kind of, be the person that I don't know, I feel like life is short, right? So I think you don't always realize that until you lose somebody close to you.
Mhm.
And I think you start asking those questions. I mean, I hope it doesn't have to come to that for everybody to get to the ability to break out of that shell that I had, which was, I had that male defensive kind of guard up, and everything was, I could joke with my friends and I could make fun of them, but I couldn't really be open and vulnerable with them.
Wow, thank you guys for sharing that. I'm sorry to hear about your father's passing, Matt.
You know what? It was, I appreciate that, but it was definitely one of those things that, it was a surprise. So when it happens, when it's a surprise, and I think you don't have the time to prepare yourself, you do start saying, oh my God, what am I leaving on the table with my relationships? Like, do I want to, because it could happen, life is not, tomorrow's not guaranteed. So I think it was more like, how do I want to live my life day to day beyond, like, I think we're so focused on these big goals. We talk about that a lot in the pod, and what you were saying about success and money and careers and house. And we're so focused so little on how do I just want to be on a day-to-day level? How do I want to carry myself in the world? How do I want to treat people? How do I want to interact? How often do I want to interact? How deep do I want these relationships to be? So I think I started asking those questions. And honestly, the podcast, we've been learning as we go. We've been taking so many listener questions and examining so many different elements of friendship, because we do think friendship is, people just don't even remember or realize friendship is a relationship. It's just the most underserved one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so beautifully said. I love that.
Sorry. So, Dr. Murthy, you had mentioned human connection, obviously. And when you say that, me and Matt think about work, because that is where there used to be a lot of human connection, and now there is not so much anymore. Now, just a little backstory. Matt and I, we live in LA, but we're from New York. Matt was a corporate lawyer, run out of town. I worked on Wall Street, basically fired from Wall Street. So neither of us have been in an office in about 2 decades, because we're not.
We have no business. We have no business being in the corporate world.
Matt recently said that his work records are sealed by the Warren Commission. They can't be.
2080, in the year 2080, you can see how it went down.
But we're getting a lot of questions about work, because people miss their work friends, and that's where you spend many hours a day. So we kind of want to know where you come down on work friends and the hybrid versus remote. I'd also love to know sort of what your work friends are like. I mean, are you in a group chat with Kamala? Like, if you go out for margaritas after work, or who's paying? Are we paying? Like,
are the taxpayers paying for your happy hours? I would like
margaritas. I'm happy to pay, but we're just curious.
These are really good questions. Look, I'm a huge believer that work friends really matter, not just for your work, but for your life outside of work. We spend a lot of our time working as human beings. And there's actually good data now that tells us that when you have close friendships in the workplace, it's actually associated with doing better in the workplace, specifically better creativity, better productivity, retention tends to be better, and you have an impact on the people around you. And the converse is true as well. And I do think that this was a real challenge during COVID, and even in the years since the height of the pandemic, when we did have a major shift in how present people were in person with one another. Now, look, I think it's important for flexibility in the workplace wherever possible, because sometimes that can allow, for example, a parent to be more present with their children, or be there for pickup or drop off, or have dinner with their family, or save time in a commute that could otherwise be spent with friends. And that can be incredibly valuable. But there's also something we have to acknowledge we lose, because that lack of in-person interaction in the workplace means that we've got to be even more intentional about making up for the gap in terms of relationships and friendships. Like, I just think, for example, about what it's like to do a virtual meeting, for an hour with 6 people on your team, versus what happens when that meeting is in person. And what happens in person is that people will gather, like, in a room. There's a few minutes of chatting that happens, like, before the meeting. Then you're noticing stuff, like, during the meeting. Maybe somebody seems preoccupied. Maybe their tone of voice is a little bit off. You may have a few minutes after the meeting where you get a chance just to chat a little bit. Maybe you pull somebody aside and you're like, hey, I noticed that maybe that you seem a little different. Is everything okay? Are you all right? Maybe you both walk to the next meeting together, or you're both going to have lunch, and so you end up having lunch together. There are these spontaneous, unplanned interactions that just happen, like when we're together, and we also just process a lot more about our interactions with each other. And so it can feel much more humanizing when you have in-person time with each other. So I think for workplaces that are either largely remote or half and half in terms of hybrid work structures, you have to be much more intentional about finding spaces and places to bring people together in person, so that they can build those relationships, have spontaneous interactions in between engagements, and build the kind of connections that's really, really vital. We do that in our workplace. Like, just to be super clear, we do not fund any of our social connection work or social time with any taxpayer dollars. That's all on us. But what we do know is that if we can build stronger bonds with each other, we can actually deliver better on our commitment to the public, right? Which is to ensure that we are doing everything we can to work on the critical public health issues that face America. And so part of that means that a lot of us do spend time together outside the office, on weekends or in evenings. In between, people will sometimes gather and just, have meals with one another. If people are hybrid, or if they're, not necessarily in DC all the time, we'll try to make sure that we have opportunities for people to come together physically and gather on a regular basis. And we also do this sort of fun thing once a week during our all staff meetings, where we have somebody actually interview another person for about 10 minutes about their life. And it'll just be about anything in their life as long as it's not about their current job. We have variants on this too. We had something we called our inside scoop exercise, where we would have somebody spend 5 minutes during an all staff meeting sharing pictures of their life with other people. And as long as it wasn't about work, everyone just looked at those pictures and we learned about people's lives. I'll share one quick anecdote with you about one of those sessions that always sticks with me. During my first term as Surgeon General, when we started doing this, we had one gentleman in our team who was my aide de camp, who got up to share, and he had spent time in the Marine Corps before he joined our U.S. Public Health Service. And everyone thought that the pictures he was going to share were of his time in the Marine Corps. We knew it was a really important part of his life experience and identity. But the pictures he showed us were actually about his mom and his dad. And he showed us his picture of his father playing an instrument. And he said his father was a musician but died early. And every time his kids now picked up an instrument, he saw his father's talent and skills like coming through his own kids. When he showed us the picture of his mother, he told us that when he was deployed in the Marine Corps on missions that were so dangerous that he didn't know if he was going to come back alive, and when he felt the pit of fear rising in his stomach, that the person that he would think about was his mother, because she was his picture of strength. She had largely raised him and his brother on her own. She had put food on the table, gotten them through school on her own. And throughout that all, she had kept a bright face. She was always there for them. She was a source of unconditional love. She was his picture of strength. And that whole experience with Luis, that was his name, took 5 minutes. And we learned so much about Luis. We felt so much closer to him as not just a work colleague, but as a friend. After that 5 minutes, we could see so many bits and pieces of our own lives in the stories that he told. And so that is the power of honest sharing, of authentic moments. And can you combine that kind of sharing with opportunities to gather in person and have some unstructured time together? You can really foster powerful relationships that are, again, not only good for people's work, but they can positively impact how they feel outside of work with their families and their neighborhoods. And that's really what we're aiming for here.
I love that. And you completely ducked the question about who's in the WhatsApp group chat.
Oh. Yeah, that will have to remain confidential.
Yeah. I would love to see some of those memes.
But I will tell you that they're just to people who wonder about tech. How does tech help? Is it helpful, harmful, etc.? Look, I think technology can be a really helpful supplement to our in-person interactions. Like I have a group chat with several groups, of my guy friends and several groups of mixed friends who are guys and girls. And we use those as opportunities just throughout the day to share funny moments, to share, challenging moments, and just to share, period. And we entertain each other. We have a great time. And that is a supplement, though, to our in-person gatherings. And I found that, like, if we just had the group chats, like, they would be great. They'd be better than nothing. But I find that when we are together in person, even if it's just for a day or two, that it just feels like it supercharges our relationships, and it actually makes our group chats in between all the more meaningful.
It's amazing that you have that, because honestly, the one thing about our trophy that we always tell people about is it anchors our friendship in a way that nothing else can. We know where we're going to be 50 years from now, knock on wood. We're going to be at Peter Luger's Steakhouse in Brooklyn voting on who had the best year. So again, I love that, what you're saying about how all of the text chains in between just, are added fuel, but that's the one that supercharges it. So before we let you go, we wanted to give you the chance to talk about what you're actually, doing with your mission, some actual tangible things that you're doing. But we wanted to do this pod because we wanted to bridge the gap between your plan as Surgeon General and us little people on the ground doing the work. So we wanted to ask right here on the pod, can you and will you deputize Aaron and I to be chief friendship officers of the U.S., and can we get badges? And if
I
so,
love
what do we
this.
tell people about what you're doing? I mean, we want to go out there and spread the gospel of what the Surgeon
CFOs.
General is doing.
I love this. Chief Friendship Officer is the other CFO. That is fantastic. Well, I think that's a great designation for both of you. I can also give you an additional one if you'd like, which is I think you guys should be recognized as neighborhood surgeon generals who are helping to like build community and connection and look out for people's health in your neighborhoods. So I think it's very appropriate given the amazing work that you've done. But look, I gotta say, I love, like, Matt, when you're just saying, like, you all know where you're going to be in 50 years, that you're going to be at the steakhouse in Brooklyn together voting on Man of the Year. So a friend once told me, he said, 90% of the joy of a vacation is in the anticipation of it. And I think there's something to be said about our interaction and with each other too, is that it's not only amazing to get together, but it's amazing to look forward to getting together. And when we know that we're going to see each other, not only does it give us that anticipation, but it gives us a source of stability and an anchor in a world that can feel incredibly disruptive and feel like it's buffeting us about. And sometimes, like, I think one of the things I lament is that it's become so easy to cancel and change plans on each other, right? In this day, you just, like, before, I remember when I was in college, not to be the old guy, but like this is like prior to, having cell phones. And when we said, hey, we're all going to meet at 9 o'clock at Out of Town News, and we're going to go to dinner from there, we all showed up, and we knew we had to show up, because if we didn't show up, people were going to be literally waiting for us, and we couldn't tell them otherwise. And so it didn't mean that if there was an emergency, we didn't attend to that. Of course we did, but it wasn't so easy to just sort of shrug off a commitment, or to say, yeah, I'll just text back, I'm not into it, or to flake, or to ghost somebody. And I do think that there's something important about not only establishing but honoring our obligations to come together with one another, because we never know how much that commitment means to somebody else, like how they may have had an incredibly hard week or month or year, and what's keeping them going is knowing that they're going to be getting together with their dear friends, and that's going to be a moment of relief. It's going to be a time for them to just exhale. And so I just think that, like, if we can not only make those commitments but stick to them, I think we'll not only will we help other people, but my hope is that we'll realize that we actually all have the ability to help each other heal at a time when a lot of people are hurting. And you don't have to be a neighborhood surgeon general or a doctor or a chief friendship officer to be able to help people who might be struggling in silent, quiet ways. Maybe one last story I'll share with you here is, like, when I was in high school, kids were allowed to drive, if they had their license, and go to lunch off campus. And a lot of kids did. But during one tragic day, one of my classmates went for a drive with two other classmates, got into a car accident, and lost his life. And my dear friend, who was actually sitting next to him in the car when this all happened, was deeply traumatized by this. And I remember I didn't quite know what to do. Honestly, I was in, I think, 10th grade at the time, and my sister was in 10th grade too. And we were just like, well, what do we do? We feel horrible about this. And I remember my mother saying to us, she said, you need to call him, and you need to go over and spend time with him today. And we said, well, what if he doesn't want to spend time with us? What if he wants to be on his own? She's like, if he doesn't want to be with you, he will tell you. But if he does want to be with you, how are you going to know if you don't knock on his door and show up? And so she took us over, I remember, and dropped us off at his house after we called him to say we were coming by. And we spent 4 hours with him. And during those 4 hours, we didn't talk for a single minute about what happened in that car accident. But at the end, that was the only time he referenced this. He just said, when we were getting into our parents' car to go back home, he said, you know what? He said, guys, I just want to thank you. It really meant a lot to me that you came over. And I really, really needed this. And we could hear him sort of choke up when he said that. But I always remember that, because it reminds me that we can't always wait for an invitation to come into people's lives. Sometimes we just have to show up. And we don't always know the full effect of our presence on other people. Sometimes, like, it's a word of concern from us. It's a few moments where we take to just listen to someone and honor what they're going through. That could make all the difference in their life. And in some cases, it can even save a life. So it's one of the reasons I'm just grateful that you're doing the work you're doing on friendship, on building community. This is one of the most important things that we need in our lives for health, for happiness, and fulfillment. It's community, it's connection, it's friendships. And if we can build that, if we can help our kids build that, gosh, we will go a long way toward ensuring that they are happy and well in the future.
Matt, does this interview get us Man of the Year? I mean, come on,
I know.
this is amazing.
But it is truly amazing. I just want to say, before we end the convo, you hit on a lot of things that we've discovered in the pod that are kind of our tenets. One of them is like, your friends are not mind readers. Karo loves calendaring. He's super organized, and he's right, because what you talked about, putting it in the calendar. I said on a recent pod, I actually love having something on the calendar with my friends. When I look at that calendar and I see there's something on there, it does make me feel good. And with people who are down or grieving or just whatever, it's always better to say something than say nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, Aaron, you guys are doing such important work. Just thank you for doing this on behalf of humanity, but for men in particular. I think this is a conversation that doesn't happen often enough. And I suspect that as much as what you say, it's how you model that kind of friendship between men that's incredibly powerful. So thank you for letting me be a part of this today.
Thank you so much. And before, is there, we can do it afterwards, but is there something that we should send people to? Is there a resource? Like, I wasn't sure if there's some sort of resource that we could plug or tell people, hey, if I'm struggling and I want to be able to access any of the resources that you are. I don't even know if there are resources, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, certainly if anyone wants to learn more about the work that we've done on loneliness and social connection, or on parents and the mental health challenges parents are dealing with and how we can address those, if you just go to our website, surgeongeneral.gov, you will find a link to all of our key advisories. And I've typically tend to write op-eds along with some of these as well. Especially I did one on parenting recently and on loneliness as well. And so I hope that these resources, which you can find at surgeongeneral.gov, will be helpful. But finally, for anyone who's in crisis, who's in a place where you're really feeling like you're struggling with your mental health, or if you're in a place where you're actually actively having thoughts about harming yourself or others, it's important at that point to ask for help. And there is an emergency line, a crisis line, 988, that anyone can dial or text 24/7 to get access to trained empathetic healthcare professionals who can help you find some relief and be a bridge to longer term care.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Murthy, for everything you've done. Also, check out the Surgeon General's podcast called House Calls. We love it. And you can find us at manoftheyearpodcast.com. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Always remember, be good to yourself, be good to your friends. Hey, Matt, I love you, buddy.
Love you, buddy.
Oh, man. Well,